The whole world was shaken. Music lost a soul. And Birmingham, the city that once nurtured the fierce scream of an immortal icon, stood silent in sudden mourning. On a heavy Monday in July 2025, Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness of rock and roll, drew his final breath just 2 weeks after the historic farewell concert with Black Sabbath at Aston Villa Stadium. There were no warning signs, no farewell, no goodbye, just pure shock. And it wasn't just the fans. It stunned those closest to him, longtime friends, and the entire art world into disbelief, sorrow, and unspeakable grief. Ozzy is gone. A simple sentence, yet it hits with the force of an emotional bomb. No one expected it, at least not so soon after a concert dubbed the Final Bell. A night where he stood on stage, trembling but unbroken, facing tens of thousands of fans, each lyric he sang, ringing like a farewell gilded with tears and memory. No one knew it would be the last time the madman would roar on this earth. No one imagined that behind those legendary stage lights, eternal darkness was quietly waiting. The news broke at 9 a.m. UK time in a short, terse post from the official Ozzy Osbourne account. In the first few minutes, many thought it was a sick joke, a cheap ploy for attention. Gene Simmons, the Kiss legend, said he was numb inside when his 2 children called him at dawn, choking up as they delivered the news. Simmons, who had seen countless stars fall, didn't believe it was true until confirmation came from Sharon Osbourne in Los Angeles. "I thought it was fake news," he said. "I screamed at my kids. I thought someone had hacked Ozzy's account. It couldn't be. No way." But the truth is always the cruelest. Hours later, Piers Morgan, famed broadcaster and close friend of the Osbourne family, wrote on X, formerly Twitter, "I just cried. Ozzy wasn't just a music legend. He was the last remaining rebel soul in a world slowly wrapped in emotional insulation. The world just lost an earthquake." Hundreds of artists, from legends to unknowns, from casual fans to rockers touched by Ozzy, shared their tributes. A tidal wave of emotion swept across social media. Rock radio stations worldwide played Crazy Train in unison as a ritual of mourning. But amid the tears and grief, one question began to stir in the minds of the more lucid. Was Ozzy's death truly random? Or was it a scripted ending, a destined finale? No one can forget the farewell concert on July 12th at Aston Villa Stadium in Birmingham, a night when the universe itself seemed to choke up with every beat from Tommy Clufetos's drums, every dark chord from Tony Iommi, every brutal riff Ozzy rasped out like a weary warrior who never bowed. And then, just 14 days later, the legend was gone. Something felt wrong. There had been no public signs of critical health. The latest updates from the family suggested he was recovering well from last year's spinal surgery. Ozzy had even said he still wanted to record after the tour wrapped. So what happened? A sudden death always invites suspicion. With Ozzy Osbourne, that suspicion multiplies because of everything he ever stood for: case, mystery, and a defiance of all worldly order. He once bit the head off a bat on stage, was banned from both the US and UK in the 80s for being too dangerous, was accused of promoting the occult, but also publicly fought Parkinsons with courage. A man of contradictions, but original ones. And now this abrupt ending forces the inevitable question. Did Ozzy know his death was near? Did he leave something behind? A final diary? A secret recording? A farewell letter? From now on, heavy metal loses a part of its soul. For many generations, Ozzy Osbourne was more than just a rocker. He was a pop culture icon, a man who could converse with demons at Donington Park, yet hug his wife and children like a grumpy but loving father on the reality show, The Osbournes. A man once blacklisted by the industry, later enshrined in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Once mocked as a lunatic rebel, later knighted by the Queen of England. A man who fit no mold, and now cannot be replaced. The morning Ozzy passed, Birmingham was overcast and cold like a page from a Gothic novel. The familiar red brick walls of Aston Villa still seemed to echo the roars of that final night. And under the shattered yellow glow of the old city streets, people began placing flowers, candles, and photos of the Prince of Darkness. No one told them to, but everyone knew. A part of youth, a part of rebellious longing, a part of musical dreams, had just been taken away. How did you hear the news of Ozzy's passing? Was it from the morning broadcast? From a shared post on social media? Or from the immortal songs you once played over and over in your youthful room? Share your feelings in the comments, because legends never die, as long as memory lives in the hearts of the fans. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel as we dive deep into the paradoxical, passionate, and shadowy life of Ozzy Osbourne, from the heights of glory to the brutal corners behind the spotlight. Because this isn't just a story about a death, it's the final symphony of a soul that never bowed. And like a prelude to destiny, the farewell concert at Aston Villa Stadium on July 12, 2005 became a goodbye that no one realized in advance. If Ozzy's death was the sudden toll of a bell ending a symphony of darkness, then that concert was the final chapter written in blood, tears, and the roar of tens of thousands of broken hearts. An unofficial ceremony, yet sacred to the bone. A performance that was not just a show, but a rite, where the entire heavy metal universe bowed before its last king. Aston Villa Stadium, in the heart of Birmingham, the cradle of Black Sabbath, was no longer just a sports ground that day. It became a cathedral. Over 50,000 fans from around the world gathered, not just to watch a performance, but to witness the closing of an epic. Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward, the original four of Black Sabbath, appeared together for the first time in over 2 decades, marking a reunion no one dared dream of in this age. The presence of legends like Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Judas Priest, Rob Zombie, and Slipknot only thickened the air of myth, but felt like rock's sons gathering to bid farewell to their father. No one forgot the moment the giant LED screen lowered as Tony Iommi's familiar guitar scream pierced the air, and from thick smoke, Ozzy emerged, but not the Ozzy who once jumped wildly on stage. He appeared on a black throne, a wheelchair slowly lifted onto the stage by a hydraulic system, surrounded by purple light, the color of mourning, of power, and of return. He didn't need to stand. He didn't need to shout. Just by raising his hand, he made the crowd scream in tears. One hand held a fixed mic, the other held Tony Iommi's hand. No one spoke. No one laughed. They stood. And stood and cried. The media called it the King's Return, a symbol both beautiful and brutal because it portrayed clearly the price of a legend who had burned for over 50 years. For more than 2 hours, the stadium seemed hypnotized. Ozzy didn't sing much, but each time he did, the entire crowd exploded. Classics like Iron Man, Paranoid, War Pigs, and Nanye B rang out not just as songs, but as hymns echoing through the cathedral of rebellious souls. Many collapsed, from emotion, from the feeling that they were witnessing something unrepeatable. And when Metallica came on stage to perform Changes with Ozzy, a sorrowful, quiet song about change and parting, many turned their backs to the stage, unable to bear the sight of Ozzy's frail smile as he closed his eyes and nodded gently to the music, as if he was telling himself, one last time and forever. Geezer Butler cried. Bill Ward trembled as he drummed. Tony Iommi even paused during a solo to walk over and touch Ozzy's shoulder, as if to make sure he was still there, still present. No one knew that just 2 weeks later, that touch would be the last time they'd stand together. No one knew, but everyone felt it. A chill in the air, sacred and heavy, as if the universe itself held its breath. What made the night even more strange was that Ozzy said nothing as the show ended. No goodbye, no thank you, no I love you all like he'd shouted in hundreds of shows before. He simply closed his eyes, raised both hands high as if surrendering or bidding farewell. And then the lights went out. The black throne slowly lowered from the stage. A complete silence fell over the stadium. No encore, no fireworks, just quiet tears running down the faces of tens of thousands. A wordless ending, and for that, all the more painful. To the people of Birmingham, that show was not just a music event. It was a homecoming ritual, a circle closed. Ozzy, the poor boy who once lived in a house without heating in Aston, had returned to the place where he grew up, where he formed Black Sabbath, and now where he ended his journey. There was something fairy tale-like, yet cruel, in the way fate brought Ozzy back to where it all began, only to quietly extinguish his torch right there. And as the crowd slowly left the stadium, everyone knew they had witnessed something beyond the definition of concert. They had witnessed an ending, no warning, no explanation, simply the end. Perhaps that is why when Ozzy passed away just 14 days after that concert, people were not as surprised as they might have expected. The suddenness was shocking, but not entirely illogical. Perhaps Ozzy knew. Perhaps he sensed it. And if that was the case, then the moment he appeared on the black throne, raised his hand to wave at the audience, and then slipped into eternal darkness 2 weeks later. Not only was that the most beautiful image to end a career, but it also stands as one of the most poignantly orchestrated and grand finales in modern music history. Have you watched clips from Ozzy's final performance? Do you remember a moment that brought you to tears? Was it when he whispered goodbye after changes? Or when the light illuminated him sitting quietly on stage while the world fell silent to witness him one last time? Share your feelings in the comments, because music is immortal, but it is the memories of fans that keep the soul of a legend alive. And perhaps precisely because he knew his final days were near, the moment Ozzy sat on the black throne in the center of Aston Villa's stage felt all the more sacred. Behind the image of a king waving to the audience for the last time lay nearly 2 decades of silently battling an invisible, merciless enemy, Parkinson's disease. A fierce fight lasting nearly 20 years, yet he never publicly disclosed it during the early stages. A fight where Ozzy neither sought pity nor begged for sympathy. He chose to face it. He chose to continue. And it was that choice, not the hits, that made the Prince of Darkness genuinely immortal. Few knew that Ozzy Osbourne had been diagnosed with Parkinson's as far back as 2003, a rare genetic form of the disease with especially brutal symptoms. It not only caused trembling limbs and distorted speech, but also reduced balance and mobility. This was not the ordinary Parkinson's disease the public was familiar with. Parkin2 is a mutation, rare in adults, with no cure. Yet from 2003 until 2020, Ozzy did not reveal a word. No announcements, no complaints, no excuses to cancel a performance or delay a recording. He kept the secret as part of his strategy, or rather, as part of his determination. It wasn't until a 2020 interview on Good Morning Britain that Ozzy publicly disclosed his condition. In that moment, speaking slowly and with sad eyes, he admitted he had fought privately for nearly 17 years. The audience was stunned. The music industry fell silent. No one could imagine that the man still singing, still screaming, still commanding the stage with the No More Tours 2 tour was being destroyed from the inside. And in that moment of shock, people began to understand. The staggered steps, the breath-halted vocals, the unusual movements. These were not signs of old age, but traces of a life-or-death struggle being fought before their eyes. After that revelation, Ozzy did not retreat from the public. On the contrary, he became more accessible. He appeared on reality shows, continued interviews, and most notably, kept recording, releasing new music. The album Ordinary Man released in 2020, followed by Patient Number 9 in 2022, both critically acclaimed, not only for their musical quality, but for the stubborn resilience hidden behind every note. By then, his voice had weakened, his fingers no longer steady, yet when Ozzy spoke, it was still the signature sound, raw, haunting, and deep, like the soul of heavy metal itself. And he never apologized for being sick, never explained why his voice wasn't as clear, never defended himself when someone mocked him for speaking slurred like a madman. Ozzy just smiled and sang like there was no tomorrow, sang as though the disease was a shadow that never existed. Those close to him, like Piers Morgan, shared, Ozzy didn't endure the disease. He lived with it. He turned it into fuel. And then he went on as if nothing could stop him. One story, recounted by Sharon Osbourne, brought tears to fans' eyes. Once Ozzy was ordered to take complete rest after a severe complication, and doctors required that he avoid stage lights for at least 3 months. Yet at that time, a die-hard fan in Japan wrote, begging to meet him because she was in end-stage cancer treatment. Without telling anyone, Ozzy quietly appeared at a secret meet and greet in Tokyo. No lights, no stage, Just a small room, one chair, and a hug. When the woman broke down crying, Ozzy said simply, "If you don't give up, I won't give up." And the room fell silent like a sacred ceremony. Fans everywhere, from London to Los Angeles, from Mexico City to Milan, shared that story like sacred scripture. Because to them, Ozzy was not just a man with a mic on stage. He was the embodiment of a primal bravery, a bravery not loud, not flashy, but burning slowly like heated steel, enduring and unbreakable. Perhaps it was precisely this battle with Parkinson's that made Ozzy feel more human than ever. No longer the bat-biting stage madman, no longer the iconic madman of the 80s, but a man who had journeyed through glory and the abyss of illness, yet still held his head high and said, "I am still alive." In a world where stars fade quickly due to scandal, pressure, mental health, or early death, Ozzy was a permanent anomaly, a symbol not buried by age or pills, a soul that never surrendered. And that is precisely why hundreds of thousands of people came to Birmingham on the night he bid farewell to the stage. They didn't come just for the music. They came to bow before a man who taught them the most important lesson, that life, no matter how dark, painful, and unjust it may be, still deserves to be fought for. What do you think about Ozzy Osbourne's resilience in the face of illness? Did you ever witness one of his performances during the years he was unwell? Share in the comments, because every memory, every story about him is proof of the immortality of a soul that never gave up. And it was also from that final performance that not only the audience was overcome with emotion, but even his colleagues, those icons who had walked beside him or followed behind, could not hide their feelings. Under the stage lights that had barely gone out, tributes began to spread around the world, from backstage to social media. No one could ignore the final bow of the Prince of Darkness, and they spoke up, not as famous artists, but as people who had been inspired by Ozzy, who had been touched by him with his eccentricity, madness, but immensely sincere spirit. Gene Simmons of the the legend of Kiss, who rode the rock and roll blaze with Ozzy throughout the fiery 80s, wrote on his own page, "Ozzy is unique. No one could ever create Ozzy the way he did, and there will never be another one like him again." That short yet powerful statement quickly spread across thousands of posts, shared as a sacred mantra within the metal community. To Gene, Ozzy was not just a name, he was a spirit, a bloodline, a type of icon the music world no longer produces. Pierre de Marg, the high-profile journalist not prone to tears of praise, also surprised everyone by posting a private message between him and Ozzy. The message was simply a line of thanks after an interview years ago. But what shook the online community was not the content, but the way Ozzy always took the time to express gratitude, no matter how famous he was or if the other person was an unknown reporter. He meant it, Piers wrote, emphasizing that Ozzy's kindness was not an act. It was the real Ozzy, a man who seemed brutal on stage, but was gentle and precious behind the scenes. And the fans? They did something Ozzy himself might never have imagined. They turned social media into a grand, emotional farewell. On Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, millions of posts appeared under one hashtag. #ThankYouOzzy. Restored old photos, moments of him sitting contemplatively on the throne amid glittering lights, or moments of him roaring in front of sea-like crowds, became icons of an era. People called it the Black Sabbath Renaissance, a revival period where a generation returned to rediscover old hits, first recognizing the loneliness, the rebellion, and the fervent love of an immortal Ozzy Osbourne. One Twitter user wrote, "I thought no one could ever make me cry. Yet just listening to the solo of No More Tears last night made me cry like a child." Another shared a short clip capturing the moment Ozzy held the hand of a paralyzed fan in a wheelchair, then whispered in his ear, "You're stronger than all of us." That clip immediately went viral with millions of views, not because of fame, but because it showed Ozzy never forgot those who lifted him to the top. His influence extended far beyond the stage. At the final performance, many were surprised to see Metallica and Guns N' Roses, two other titans, participating as special guests. They weren't there to showcase their talent, but to pay tribute. James Hetfield held the mic, didn't sing, but said, "If it weren't for Ozzy, there wouldn't be us. If he didn't exist, there would be no such thing as heavy metal." Slash, with his curly hair covering his face, simply bowed deeply before playing the opening riff of Crazy Train. The entire venue fell silent. No one sang. They stood motionless, as if attending the funeral of a king. And in some way, that's exactly what it was. Ozzy isn't dead, but a piece of the legend has gone into eternity. And the question now echoes everywhere. What is it that makes Ozzy an irreplaceable icon in the hearts of fans and fellow musicians? Was it the voice that sounded like a curse? The devil-may-care aura yet full of magnetism? The ability to transform pain, addiction, and career-crushing crises into fuel to burn brighter on stage? Or the fact that he never called himself a star? He always referred to himself as a lucky bastard, a man fortunate enough to live by music, to be forgiven by an audience that loved and awaited him. Ozzy was all of those things, and beyond that, he was a person who lived authentically. No filters, no calculations, no bowing to trends. When the world turned toward polished pop, R&B, and EDM, he remained loyal to metal, to the darkness, to the scream of guitars and dim lights. And it was precisely that steadfastness, that quality of belonging only to himself, that made him a monument. Therefore, no matter where the world goes, no matter how much music continues to change, one thing remains certain. The name Ozzy Osbourne will forever live on like a smoldering flame in the hearts of those who once stood in the crowd and screamed his name. Those who once saw him as the last wisp of smoke guiding them out of a pressured reality. Those who once found liberation in a voice that seemed mad but was steeped in poetry. And if you are reading these words, perhaps you too were once a part of that journey. You once heard an Ozzy song you still can't forget. Once were moved by a melody, a glance, a moment when he sat down and embraced a fan as if embracing his own life. So share with us, which song by Ozzy or Black Sabbath moved you the most? Leave a comment below, and if you also want to continue being part of this journey, honoring a legend. And in the midst of the frantic screams and screeching guitars at that concert, the fateful moment occurred. Ozzy Osbourne caught a bat that had flown onto the stage and suddenly bit into its head. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, and the entire stage exploded into a seismic wave named Wildness. Many couldn't believe their eyes. They thought it was a stage prop, but no, it was a real bat. And Ozzy, according to what he later recalled, thought it was a rubber toy until he tasted the raw, shocking tang of fresh blood in his mouth. That act, impulsive and admittedly foolish, forever etched his name into the history of rock music as an indelible icon. Because that moment, despite harsh criticism, was a living testament to Ozzy's wild, uncontrollable yet truthful nature, an artist who lived by instinct and never apologized for being himself. No one else could have done that and still been so deeply loved. Because to his fans, Ozzy wasn't a madman. He was the embodiment of a musical era where all boundaries could be broken. Biting the Bat's head became a legend, retold across countless talk shows, featured in music documentaries, and even referenced in daring ad campaigns. That act, seemingly a ridiculous mistake, helped define the very essence of Ozzy, a substance no one could replicate or recreate. And somehow, all those wild acts were inseparable from the rebellious lifestyle ingrained in Ozzy Osbourne's very being. In the 1920s and early 1980s, Ozzy and the members of Black Sabbath dove headfirst into a musical journey drenched in drugs, hard liquor, and sleepless nights. LSD, cocaine, marijuana, those names weren't just stimulants. They were the raw material of a wild and inspired era. But behind the glory were uncontrollable breakdowns. Ozzy was once kicked out of Black Sabbath for his addictions and erratic behavior. He nearly died from overdoses, locked himself away in the darkness of depression and panic. Yet at the lowest point of collapse, Ozzy stood back up. He once admitted that without Sharon, his wife, manager, and greatest emotional anchor, he would have died long ago. It was Sharon who helped Ozzy recover from addiction, pulled him up from his own ashes, and reignited his solo career with tracks like Crazy Train, Mr. Crowley, and No More Tears that the world could not ignore. That resurrection transformed Ozzy into a symbol of resilience, a testament that even in the darkest worlds, there is still a chance for rebirth. Not just a rock singer, Ozzy became a pop culture phenomenon. From blazing stages to the reality show The Osbournes, he entered the living rooms of millions, bringing with him a quirky but lovable personality, strange yet relatable, a raspy, energetic voice, a one-of-a-kind stage presence, and above all, a deep gratitude for his fans made Ozzy transcend the boundaries of music, becoming an icon of rebellion, freedom, and never giving in. Those who once mocked him, who saw him as a joke on stage, now all have to admit, Ozzy didn't just survive, he triumphed over everything. The question arises, did rebellious acts like biting a bat's head diminish Ozzy's appeal? Or was it, in fact, what made him great? In a world where everything is staged and meticulously calculated, a crazy, honest, and uncontrolled act spreads more powerfully than 1,000 dull gimmicks. Ozzy never apologized for his past. He embraced it, even the darkest parts, and turned it into a living declaration of himself. That's what millions of rock lovers around the world saw in him, a part of themselves, people who had once been lost, fallen down, but still stood up, lived truthfully, and became legends. ChatGPT.9. And perhaps what makes Ozzy Osbourne unforgettable is not just his music or the scandals, but the moments when he touched hearts in the most unexpected ways. He made people cry, made them laugh, and made them place a hand over their chest and ask themselves, have I ever lived as wildly and honestly as that? Those moments, from the shocking bat-biting incident to the time he tearfully spoke of his son overcoming illness, are the essence of the immortal Ozzy Osbourne in the eyes of the public. No one could have guessed that behind the image of the Emperor of Rock, with the screaming voice, the wild eyes, and a life full of controversy, there was a woman quietly standing behind him, the unshakable anchor through every storm. And that woman's name is Sharon Osbourne. From the very first days when Ozzy was expelled from Black Sabbath, plunged into the depths of despair and addiction, it was Sharon who reached out and pulled him from the darkness. She wasn't just his wife, she was his manager, strategist, healer, and at times his mother, friend, and therapist, all in one person. Sharon didn't choose a peaceful life. She chose Ozzy, which meant choosing hell itself, and determined to turn it into a home. Without Sharon, there would be no shining solo Ozzy, no Blizzard of Oz, the legendary 1980 album that laid the foundation for a new career after his expulsion from his former band. There would be no sold-out shows, no successful tours, and certainly no powerful Osbourne media empire later on. Sharon saw potential in Ozzy when the entire world had turned its back on him. She bet her life on a man most believed was beyond saving. And she won. But the cost of that victory was countless sleepless nights, hospital visits due to Ozzy's overdoses, seizures and loss of control, endless scandals, lawsuits, and even betrayal. Sharon once said, "I didn't fall in love with a rock star. I fell in love with a torn soul, and I knew I couldn't let go." That love, neither smooth nor glamorous, was a love built of blood, tears, and absolute loyalty. In the final years when Ozzy could barely perform anymore due to Parkinson's and endless surgeries, it was Sharon who stood by his side every single day. She cleared his schedule, refused unnecessary contracts, tended to every meal and sleep, supporting him both physically and mentally. The man who had once gone through the darkest depths of addiction now only wanted to hold his wife's hand and sleep peacefully beside her. They no longer needed the stage, the spotlight. Their world had shrunk to just the two of them and their children, a family forged through pain, yet full of pride. Their children, Kelly, Jack, and Amy, are living proof of the strange, unbreakable bond in the Osbourne family. Each with their own personality and path, they always come together when their father needs them. Kelly, rebellious yet sensitive, never left Ozzy's side in his final months. Jack, once a struggling alcoholic like his father, became the calm one, always protecting his mother in medical decisions. Amy, the most private of the three, quietly appeared behind the scenes to check in on her father. They once seemed chaotic on the Osbournes, quarreling, threatening to leave home. But in the end, this family remains unbelievably united. They love in messy, foul-mouthed ways, but no one can doubt the authenticity and strength of that love. When Ozzy passed, the void wasn't just in the world of rock. It was an emptiness no one could fill in Sharon's heart. A part of her body, a part of her soul, had gone with that man. Yet the legacy Ozzy left behind isn't confined to albums, tours, or titles. His greatest legacy is the Osbourne family itself, a home that once fell apart, once mocked, but has endured the test of time. And at the center of that home, the one who kept the fire burning, the heartbeat alive, is none other than Sharon. Even at the very end, people still asked, if not for Sharon, would Ozzy have survived those near-death experiences? Could he have made it through a decade of solo success? Could he have become a pop culture icon beyond the boundaries of rock? The answer continues to echo in tears and farewells. And perhaps the deeper question is this: could Sharon Osbourne be the greatest, most legendary hit of Ozzy Osbourne's entire life? Though Ozzy Osbourne's life was full of upheaval, from addiction to physical suffering, he remained a symbol in rock music that could not be replaced. At 75, the Prince of Darkness was still a strange light in the night, a symbol of defiance, of living true to oneself, and fighting to the very end for passion. His story proves that music isn't just melody. It is blood, soul, and the unbreakable thread that ties a person to the world, regardless of time, age, or pain. His love for Sharon, the warm embraces with his children, and the fire still burning in his eyes every time he stepped on stage, all of it made Ozzy more than just an artist. He became a living icon, a warrior with the heart of a music-loving child who never surrendered. He is a reminder that as long as we still love, still feel passion, we are still alive. And what about you? What moment of Ozzy's life will you never forget? The infamous bat biting, the emotional final performance, or those times he broke down crying over his love for Sharon? Share in the comments your favorite song or a memory of Ozzy. Don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep Ozzy Osbourne's legacy burning forever in the hearts of music lovers.